Hey everyone and welcome back to my channel. Let's take a look at the new challenge dungeons.
So challenge dungeons were added to the game as part of the recent major update, and I've been yet to cover it in a video. So today we're going to be looking at this in a little bit of detail, starting off with the overview. In challenge dungeons, monsters have 300% more life and deal 200% more damage, and challenge dungeon modifiers will take effect. Up to 2 modifiers will be added to the dungeon to increase the challenge. Modifiers are chosen at random. For the first challenge dungeon completed each week, players will receive the Challenger's Plunder chest, guaranteed to contain a set item. There will be random chances that Challenger's Plunder's chest will drop for each additional run after the weekly reward has been claimed. So these chests basically drop at random and can drop halfway through the dungeon as well. So now looking at the modifiers, starting off we've got Big Problem. Enemies are larger throughout the dungeon, the player's size is decreased. Bosses will continuously grow in size over time until they enrage. Laser. Enemies fire beams of energy at targets. Sacrificial Power, which is probably the worst one. Skills have greatly reduced cooldowns but cost health. Bad Blood. Enemies may leave behind a pool of blood after death that will slow and damage players. Bolstered. Some non-boss monsters have an aura that increases movement and attack speed of nearby monsters and gives them a shield. Rain of Fire. Fireballs occasionally fall from the sky, leaving burning areas that will damage the player. Lava Eruption. Lava periodically erupts beneath the player. Speedrun. Completing the dungeon within the time limit will grant bonus rewards. Swarming. The dungeon has more normal monsters throughout. S-Class. The dungeon has more elite monsters throughout, which is quite a nice one for experience. Gauntlet. The dungeon has no normal monsters and bosses are stronger. Heightened Sensors. Monsters sense players more easily and have greatly increased movement speed. Conjurer. Some monsters and bosses summon doppelgangers. Greed Spoils. Some skip directly to the final dungeon boss. The boss difficulty is increased. And Bountiful. Combat orbs drop more frequently. So some of the modifiers are beneficial and some of the modifiers, or the majority of the modifiers, are not. So you get the Challenger's Plunder chest for your weekly first run and then the occasional drop throughout, including legendary items and green set items, and obviously the heavy austere chest if you're running this in a 4-player party. So I'm going to do 2 runs of Cavern of Echoes today. First one we're going to run as a challenge dungeon solo, and the second one we'll run in a party as well. So we have a couple of modifiers on this one. Sometimes you're lucky and you get just one modifier, other times you get multiple modifiers, and you'll be able to see what they're like. So the first modifier is Swarming, and the second modifier is the Lava Eruption. And you can see already that the bosses, or not bosses, but these glacial monstrosities, they have actually both got doppelgangers here, so that is not going to help the speed of this dungeon at all. And you can see I'm also taking quite a lot of damage due to the fact that we've got elite monsters here as well as 4 of the same glacial monstrosity, which this is just going to be a bit frustrating. So got one left to kill there, super close to taking it down, but yeah, the damage on these is much higher. So I will actually bring up the damage log in a second so you can see the kind of damage that we're doing in these dungeons as well. The damage per second is much easier to track here, like when you track it at the boss, because in the challenge dungeon, if you're running it solo, obviously it's only you that is against the bosses. So you can see my damage per second at the moment is 6.4 million, which is crazy amount of damage per second, and that is just from all the skills that I've got equipped. I'm also using the Slinger Paragon here. I probably should have gone in with Mal's spam build for this run, but instead I'm actually using my lazy farm build that I shared a video for recently. I'll drop the link for this build in the comments, and I'm using it with the Slinger Paragon instead of Brawler like I mentioned in my build video, as this works a lot better for actually dealing damage, as you can see obviously by the damage log. So Blood Rime we've now taken down finally, and we've also reached new Paragon level as well, which is always nice to gain some extra Paragon levels. And I'm not going to focus on killing mobs here. I'm just going to keep moving forward as much as possible. I'm not running this as a speed run, but it's a good way for you to see that it is obviously a lot more difficult than your normal dungeons. It doesn't take a huge amount of time. I'd say each run probably takes a couple of minutes more, especially if you're running it solo. I do prefer to run these in a party, and I would recommend if you do run it in a party, make sure you run it with players who are similar level to you, otherwise you can end up carrying randoms. I've done a couple of these as randoms and it's always a lot harder. I mean, if you want it to be a challenge, definitely go with randoms while you can. That is limited time, and after that I believe you have to have the parties ready formed to actually run a challenge dungeon, which in my opinion, is the better option anyway, because you won't end up carrying anyone then with any luck. If you're going with just your friends, you kind of know what everyone's strength levels are like. So yeah, I do enjoy the challenge dungeons. They are a bit more interesting. I feel a little bit like the challenge dungeons are more like dungeons used to be when we all first started playing Diablo, and you weren't really able to speedrun them because we were learning skills, we were learning builds. So it kind of takes that nostalgia back a little bit to 2 years ago when Diablo was a new game and when the dungeons and bosses were more difficult to defeat. So I do like them for that reason as well. And obviously you do actually get enhanced drops. So one thing that I've not seen many people mentioning, and that it doesn't actually really track in the game, but with the challenge dungeons, I believe that you are guaranteed green after every 5 runs rather than every 7 like with the normal dungeons. So it is worth running them. You also gain more codex points for it, so more battle points for the challenge dungeons compared to normal dungeons. And obviously you'll gain quite a lot more experience because it is higher boss difficulty, higher monster difficulty throughout the dungeon. They have that increased life and the increased damage as well. So challenge dungeons, in my opinion, are quite a lot of fun. Now, I never get to this point in the boss where it's like the last second here of all of the different phases of this boss. But obviously, as this is a challenge dungeon and as I'm doing it solo, I did have to experience the whole thing today. But it's nice to see it for the first time in a very long time. So there we go, dungeon is completed, boss is taken down. Unfortunately, I didn't get another green drop there, but I do get my challenger's plunder, as it is my first challenge dungeon this week. Can you believe that? I've been so slacking with my dungeons. So I now managed to grab some of my friends to run this with me. So I've got Xeon, Cragsman and Game Zone. Obviously Xeon and GZ are both in my warband. And the first run, we actually got straight to the boss. So this is the best modifier you can get in challenge dungeon, and obviously you can get this in normal dungeons as well. So this one shouldn't take us too long to complete. I did also swap out my build to mouse spam build. For some reason it was completely shooting in the wrong direction here and not really doing much damage at all to the boss, but there we go, that is what it is. But yeah, this didn't really take us very long to complete. Normally with the skip to boss, it can be a little bit more difficult because obviously there is the increased difficulty for the boss there as well. It doesn't look like we got many of the goblins drop either, unfortunately, so not too much loot from that run. So we're going to do another run now in the full party again, and hopefully get some different modifiers for you to have a look. So for this run we have the modifiers Rain of Fire and S-Class. So Rain of Fire will mean small meteors will fall from the sky and it will leave a burning pool on the ground. So we've got 2 things to avoid there, being hit and obviously burning from them. They will leave a red circle on the ground, so it's quite clear to see those when they do drop. And S-Class means we will be seeing more elite monsters throughout the dungeon, as you may have already noticed when we entered. Now for this run I'm with my friends Bookie, Jack Yaris and Celine the Avenger as well. And I did have to swap up my team simply because for some reason the party completely bugged out when I was with my warband guys. And what happened was we basically were all running a normal dungeon except for Game Zone, who was running a challenge dungeon. So I'm not entirely sure how that bug happened, or didn't even realise that was possible. But yeah, we were all running a normal dungeon and Game Zone was running a challenge dungeon. So obviously I wasn't able to share that footage just because it wasn't a challenge dungeon for us and we didn't have any modifiers on it. So yeah, super weird for the second and third run that we attempted. So I'm going to be doing 2 runs with these guys instead and showing you again some different modifiers like I mentioned, so that you can see exactly what they're like in the challenge dungeons. I think it's interesting to see the different ones and obviously know how some of them work. As I said, some of the modifiers are much more beneficial than others. These ones in this dungeon aren't too bad. Having the S-Class one I quite like because it just means you can gain more experience throughout the dungeon. Although obviously Rain of Fire, as you can see there, is not so good because it does burn you if you walk over it, as well as obviously damage you if it hits you from above basically. So obviously we're at the boss now, and let's see how quickly we take him down and then head into another run and see what modifiers we get. Now, anyone that knows me knows that my toxic trait is that I am actually secretly super competitive. So the whole time we were doing these dungeons, I was actually more focused on trying to beat Celine's damage than anything else. So that is what I was aiming to do. And I mean, being competitive in some ways is quite good because it just means that I'm more focused on making my build better, making myself stronger as the game continues and evolves, etc. So that's kind of what I'm like in this game. So for this run, we have the modifiers Gauntlet and Laser. So the Gauntlet modifier basically means we will only be seeing the boss monsters, but they will be higher difficulty, so they will have more life and they will be doing even more damage. So you can see here we've got Blood Rhyme, and he's actually highlighted in yellow like an elite monster would be, and that is because of the increased difficulty there. Now I'm spamming my skills here to actually keep up with Celine, because obviously there's a horse involved and I do not have a horse. So spamming these skills obviously increases your movement speed as well as increasing the skills cooldown. So that's why I was using them to get through the dungeon a little bit faster as well, although this door always takes forever to open. Now I haven't really seen the laser modifier yet. I'm not sure if that's because of the, oh here we go, you can actually see it there coming from the mobs for a second. But yeah, because there aren't very many mobs, it's not that obvious that we have that modifier in this dungeon, whereas obviously the Gauntlet modifier is a lot more obvious because we've only seen the bosses. So here we are, got the Glacial Colossus now, and we'll see how quickly we can take them down. I'm also managing somehow to keep my damage up, which is nice. I may actually beat Celine with the damage in this run. But yeah, that is it. So you've seen a few different modifiers. I hope you found this video helpful and I hope you've enjoyed watching. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Have a great day.